Where are you watching us from? I'm here with us in this space that seems so quiet, but for someone else it could be the worst storm imaginable. Why do I say that? Because this is a story about silences that hide genius and about voices that need to be heard. Pay close attention, because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about possibilities. And if this story grabs you, if it makes you feel what these characters felt, promise me you'll sign up. Promise you won't miss the next story, because stories like this need to be told. The rehabilitation hospital in Zurich was a place of hope and despair. Its white corridors, lit by cold light, were a maze of lives being rebuilt. The story we are going to tell today, however, does not begin in the corridors, but in a physical therapy room, where the light was warmer and hope was more fragile. Lena, a 10-year-old girl, was sitting in her wheelchair. Her deep blue eyes stared at the floor, at her feet, which did not move. A year ago, a car accident took her mother's life and left her paralyzed. Lena's father, Victor, a millionaire in the technology industry, spared no expense. He brought in the best doctors and therapists, but nothing worked. Lena's paralysis was a mystery. Her nerves were intact, but her brain seemed to have forgotten how to walk. Victor, a man accustomed to solving problems with money and technology, was at a dead end. He looked at his daughter, at the pain in her eyes, and felt helpless. His world, which had been so big, had become small, and the only sound he heard was the sound of his own heart beating in despair. In the physical therapy room, the silence was broken only by the sound of exercise machines. And in one corner, Leo, a 12-year-old boy, sat drawing in a notebook. He was autistic, with a condition known as savant syndrome. He was a genius in everything related to logic, math, and engineering, but he had difficulty communicating. He didn't like eye contact. He didn't like to be touched. The world, for him, was a very high, very confusing place, and his notebook was his safe haven. Leo was the son of Anna, a nurse at the hospital. She took him to work because she had no one to leave him with, and even though he was a child, he was treated like an adult by everyone at the hospital. He was a genius, and people respected his silence. Victor looked at the boy, at his notebook, and didn't give it a second thought. He was focused on his daughter, on his pain, on his problem. He felt like he had failed as a father. Then the unexpected happened. Leo, who had been silent, got up and went over to Lena's wheelchair. Victor, startled, went over to him. "What are you doing? Don't touch her." Leo, without looking at Victor, looked at the wheelchair. He looked at Lena's feet, and he said in a clear but monotone voice, "The wheelchair is wrong. The problem isn't her brain. The problem is the chair and the exercises." Victor, who was in shock, looked at the boy, at his serious face. "What are you talking about? The best doctors in the world said that the problem is her brain." Leo, without hesitation, looked at the notebook. He drew a complex diagram, a diagram of the human body, the nerves, the muscles, and he drew a diagram of a wheelchair. The wheelchair isn't aligned with her body. The exercises she's doing are straining her muscles, not her nerves. That's why she can't walk. Victor, who was a genius in technology, looked at Leo's drawing, and he froze. He saw the logic. He saw the math. He saw the engineering. He saw the genius. He saw the truth. The truth that his money, his technology, the best doctors in the world, couldn't solve a problem that a 12-year-old boy with a notebook and a pencil solved. And the truth that his arrogance almost cost him his only chance to see his daughter walk again. He looked at Leo, at his silence, at his talent, and he felt small. And Leo's silence, which had once been a barrier, became a bridge to hope. Leo's story is the story of a genius living in a world that doesn't understand him. Since he was a child, he had been fascinated by everything related to logic, mathematics, and engineering. He spent hours and hours taking toys apart and putting them back together. He spent hours and hours solving complex problems. He was a genius, but he had difficulty communicating. His mother, Anna, a nurse who worked hard to raise her son alone, knew he was different. She knew that Leo's silence was not the absence of a voice, but the presence of a voice that needed to be heard in a different way. With the help of doctors and therapists, she understood that he was autistic, with savant syndrome. The diagnosis was a shock at first. But Anna, who was a strong woman, decided that she would not treat Leo's autism as a disease. She would treat it as a part of him. She decided she would create a world where Leo could flourish. The biggest challenge for Leo has always been communication. He had difficulty expressing himself, saying what he felt, and he had difficulty understanding the emotions of others. So he isolated himself. His notebook became his safe haven, his refuge, his world. But his passion had always been logic, and his passion became his way of connecting with the world. He communicated through drawings, equations, diagrams, and with his talent, he helped people. He fixed the machines at the hospital. He solved the most complex problems. He was the genius of the hospital. But his life was not a fairy tale. The other children who didn't understand him isolated him. They called him weird and mute. Leo suffered in silence. But he had his mother, Anna, and he had his notebook. The biggest challenge for Anna has always been fear. The fear that the world, which is so cruel, would hurt her son. Fear that her son, who was so innocent, would be lost. But her fear was overcome by love, the unconditional love she felt for her son. The love that made her fight for him. The love that made her his voice in the world. Anna, who was a woman of faith, believed that her son, who was so different, had a mission to show the world that genius is not the absence of a disability, but the presence of a strength that needs to be valued, and the mission to show the world that a person's silence can be the loudest voice of all. Victor, the millionaire, lived in a bubble of false hope. He believed that money, technology, and the best doctors in the world could solve any problem. He believed that life was a game of chess, and that he was the king, and that he could move the pieces as he saw fit. He hired the best neurosurgeons who examined Lena. The diagnosis was the same: psychosomatic paralysis. Her mind had blocked the connection to her nerves. They suggested therapy, hypnosis. Victor paid for everything, believing that the solution lay in science and technology. But Victor's false hope was his greatest weakness. He couldn't accept that his power and wealth couldn't cure his daughter. He couldn't accept that the solution to his daughter's problem wasn't in medicine, but in humanity. He paid for expensive therapy sessions, but the therapist, who was a famous woman, didn't know how to deal with Lena's trauma. She tried to get her to talk about the accident, but Lena, who couldn't talk about her mother's death, closed herself off. The therapy wasn't working. Frustrated, Victor thought about giving up. He thought about admitting his daughter to a psychiatric clinic, but he couldn't. He loved his daughter more than anything, and he felt that if he gave up, he would be giving up on her life. Victor's false hope was poison. Every failed attempt, every wrong piece of advice, every closed door was a scar on his heart. His life became a daily battle, a battle against his own helplessness, a battle against his own arrogance. But Victor's false hope was about to be confronted by the truth that the solution to his daughter's problem was not in a hospital, but in an autistic boy's notebook. The truth that healing is not the absence of disease, but the presence of a miracle, and that miracles are sometimes the simplest things in the world. Lena and Leo's story was not just a story of hope, it was a story of conflict. The conflict between money and humanity, between science and intuition, between arrogance and humility. The head of physical therapy at the hospital, a man named Dr. Klaus Schneider, was a man of rules and procedures. He who was responsible for Lena's rehabilitation did not believe Leo's diagnosis. "Mr. Victor, I know you're desperate, but what this boy said is an aberration. The wheelchair your daughter uses is the best in the world, and the exercises she does are the most modern. The problem is not the chair. The problem is her mind." Victor, who at first sided with Klaus, was in doubt. He had seen Leo's drawing. He had seen the logic, and he felt that Leo was right. "Dr. Klaus, I know what he said is strange, but his logic makes sense. What if he's right?" Dr. Klaus laughed. "What if he's right? Mr. Victor, the boy is autistic. He lives in his own world. He has no idea what he's talking about. Are you listening to a boy? You, one of the richest men in the world, are listening to an autistic boy." Klaus's arrogance was the human conflict. He, a scientist, couldn't accept that an autistic boy could be smarter than him. He, an expert, couldn't accept that the solution to Lena's problem wasn't in his manual, but in a notebook. And the conflict intensified when Anna, Leo's mother, entered the scene. She, a humble nurse, confronted Klaus. "Dr. Klaus, my son is not a freak. He is a genius, and he sees the world in a way you will never see. You should have the humility to listen to what he has to say." Klaus, who didn't know what to say, felt humiliated. He, the head of physical therapy, was being confronted by a nurse. The human conflict was the dilemma between science and faith, between prejudice and wisdom, between ignorance and truth. And Anna, with her strong voice, had forced Klaus to choose the truth, to choose humanity. The hospital, which was a place of hope and despair, became a place of conflict. Dr. Klaus, the head of physical therapy, was furious. He was about to fire Anna and expel Leo from the hospital. But Victor, the millionaire, intervened. Victor, who had seen Leo's genius, decided he would give the boy a chance. He called Anna. He said he wanted Leo to work with him. "Anna, I know what I'm about to ask you is strange, but I believe your son can help my daughter. I want him to work with me. I'll pay whatever it takes." Anna, who was in shock, didn't know what to say. She looked at Leo, at his notebook, and she, who was a woman of faith, believed that this was her chance, the chance to show the world that her son, who was so different, had a purpose. Leo worked silently on a project. With Victor's help, he created a special wheelchair, a wheelchair that was perfectly aligned with Lena's body, a wheelchair that didn't strain her muscles, but stimulated her nerves. And with Victor's help, he created an exercise program that was not about strength, but about logic. Leo's project was the silent turning point, the project that science could not solve, the genius of an autistic boy solved. And the most important turning point of all was not in Lena's health, but in Victor's mind. Victor, while working with Leo, began to understand what autism was. He understood that autism was not a disease, but a different way of being. He understood that autism was not a limitation, but a strength. He understood that Leo did not need to be cured, he needed to be accepted. The silent turnaround had happened. Prejudice and ignorance were about to give way to empathy and acceptance. Leo's world, which was so small and lonely, was about to expand in an impressive way. And Victor's world, which was so big and noisy, was about to learn to listen. The first time Lena used her new wheelchair, she felt something different. She felt a slight vibration in her feet. She felt a slight contraction in her muscles. She felt hope. And she, for the first time in a year, looked at her father and smiled. A shy but sincere smile. And the first time she did the new exercises, she felt that Leo's logic made sense. She felt that her body, which had once been a prison, was becoming a bridge to freedom. She felt that she could walk again. And Lena's small victory was much more than a smile. It was the victory of having her hope restored. It was the victory of having her voice, her authentic voice, recognized. And it was the victory of showing everyone at the hospital that she was much more than a victim. She was a survivor. Dr. Klaus, the head of physical therapy, who had initially judged Leo, became one of his biggest supporters. He apologized to him. He thanked him. And he looked at him, not with pity, but with admiration. Leo's life, which had once been lonely, became full of purpose. He helped people. He taught people. He became a leader, a silent leader. And his voice, which had once been silenced, became the voice of hope. Victor's life, which had once been filled with despair, became filled with hope. He, who had once been a man of money and technology, became a man of humanity and heart. He became Leo's best friend, and he became the father his daughter needed. Lena and Leo's story teaches us that hope is not an emotion but a choice. It is the choice to believe in the impossible. It is the choice to hear what is not said. It is the choice to see what is not shown. It is the choice to respect difference. It is the choice to love. Victor, the millionaire, became one of the greatest advocates for neurodiversity. He used Leo's story to change the culture of his company. He used Leo's story to show everyone that autism is not a disease, but a strength. He used Leo's story to show everyone that true strength does not lie in being like others, but in having the courage to be who you are. And Leo, seeing Victor's transformation, felt loved. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was not only accepted, but valued. He felt part of something. He felt human. Leo's reflection was not just about the world, it was about himself. He wondered how many times he had judged a person by their appearance, by their behavior. How many times he had ignored someone's silence thinking it was empty. He regretted judging Erica at first, for thinking about firing her. He felt ashamed. Leo's transformation was not only external, it was internal. He began to be a more humane, more empathetic leader. He began to care about his coworkers, to listen to what they had to say, even if it was in silence. He created an inclusion program at the company, a program that was not only for people with autism, but for all people who felt different. He remembered Olga's words. Love doesn't try to change who you are, but helps you be the best version of yourself. He understood that love, true love, wasn't just for family and friends. It was for everyone. For the janitor, for the manager, for the customer, for the world. And Igor, seeing Maximilian's transformation, felt loved. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was not only accepted, but valued. He felt part of something. He felt human. Life, at the rehabilitation hospital, changed. The place that had once been a place of despair became a place of hope. People became more open. They felt comfortable being who they were. Leo, who had previously gone unnoticed, was now the center of attention. He helped people. He taught people. He was the pillar of the hospital. But most importantly, he felt happy. But Leo's life did not become a fairy tale. His autism was still there. He still had sensory crises. He still needed his notebook to calm down. He still had difficulty making eye contact, but he was no longer alone. He had a friend, Victor. He had a team that supported him. He had a purpose. Leo's story shows us that hope is not the absence of pain, but rather the presence of tools to deal with it. Leo still felt the pain of autism, but he had the tools to navigate life. He had his passion for logic. He had the support of his mother, Anna, and he had the acceptance of Victor and the entire hospital. Leo's story is not about curing autism. It is about accepting autism. It is about the beauty that exists in difference. It is about the power of silence. And it is about the voice that exists in each of us, even if it is not spoken. What Leo's story teaches us is that true strength does not lie in being like others, but in having the courage to be who you are, even if that is different. And that true wisdom does not lie in knowing everything, but in having the humility to listen. Not every voice is heard, but every heart that loves, feels. If this story touched you, like, comment, and subscribe. Someone may need to hear this today.